My mother called me 3 weeks ago, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, telling me her heart was failing and that all she wanted was one last Christmas with her only daughter. I canceled meetings with Saudi royals, put my billion-dollar crisis management firm on autopilot, and flew 11 hours from London to Atlanta just to hold her hand. But when I walked through that door, there was no sick woman in bed, and there was no family dinner waiting. There was just my mother standing in a sequined gown pointing at a pile of dirty laundry and screaming at me to change my nephew's diapers because the nanny was too expensive. My brother laughed and told his kids to wipe their snot on my coat because it looked cheap. They thought I was their assistant. They thought I was still the broke little girl they could bully. They did not know I owned the company that managed their entire financial existence. I did not scream and I did not cry. I just pulled out my phone and pressed one button, and that is when the screaming really started. Before I tell you how I evicted my entire family on Christmas Eve, let me know where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind your family exactly who you are. The flight from Heathrow to Hartsfield Jackson International had been brutal, but anxiety kept me awake the entire time. My mother Beatrice was not a woman who cried. In the hierarchy of Atlanta society, she was a stone statue, a woman who prided herself on keeping up appearances even when the walls were crumbling. So when she called me weeping about heart palpitations and the fear of dying alone, I believed her. I am Simone, 34 years old, and to my family I am just an executive assistant who got lucky with a job overseas. To the rest of the world, I am the founder and CEO of Onyx Crisis Management, the firm that cleans up messes for Fortune 500 CEOs and minor royalty. I keep my success quiet because in my family, money is like blood in the water. It attracts sharks. I dragged my 2 large suitcases toward the curb, waving off my usual security detail because I wanted this to be a humble homecoming. I had packed gifts, expensive watches for my brother, designer bags for my sister-in-law, and a check that would cover my mother's mortgage for a year, all hidden in modest wrapping paper. The Uber ride to the gated community in Buckhead took 45 minutes. I stared out the window at the sprawling mansions, remembering how terrified I used to be of this neighborhood. My mother always made us feel like we were one missed payment away from being on the street, even though my father had left a decent insurance policy. When the car pulled up to the iron gates of my childhood home, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. It was the physical sensation of shrinking, of becoming small enough to fit into the box they had built for me. I paid the driver and dragged my bags to the front porch. The house was dark. Not the cozy candlelit dark of a holiday evening, but the cold, uninviting dark of an empty building. I rang the bell. Nothing. I rang again. Still nothing. I checked my watch. It was 7 in the evening. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. It went straight to voicemail. Panic started to set in. Was she in the hospital? Had something happened while I was in the air? The temperature was dropping fast. Atlanta winters can bite when they want to, and I was standing there in a trench coat shivering. I waited 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. My fingers were numb. I walked around the side of the house, peering into windows, looking for any sign of life. Finally, after 45 minutes of standing in the freezing cold, I saw headlights sweep across the driveway. A luxury SUV pulled up. My heart leaped, thinking maybe they had been at the hospital. But the people who got out were not doctors or nurses. It was my brother Jamal. He stepped out of the driver's seat, wearing a coat that cost more than my first car, holding a glass of wine in one hand. He looked at me, shivering on the porch, and did not even rush. He just sauntered over, took a sip of his wine, and smirked. He unlocked the front door without a word of apology. He did not ask how long I had been waiting. He did not ask if I was cold. He just pushed the door open and gestured for me to drag my own bags inside. I stepped into the foyer, expecting the smell of pot roast or mac and cheese, the comfort food my mother used to make when she wanted to manipulate us into feeling loved. Instead, the air was stale and cold. The heating was set to 60 degrees. But what stopped me dead in my tracks was the luggage. It was everywhere. 6 massive Louis Vuitton trunks were stacked in the center of the hallway like a barricade. There were ski bags, boot bags, and garment bags piled high enough to block the view of the living room. This was not the home of a dying woman. This was a staging area for an expedition. Then I heard the clicking of heels on the hardwood floor. My mother Beatrice descended the grand staircase. She looked magnificent and terrifying. Her hair was laid to perfection, her makeup was flawless, and she was wearing a silver sequined gown that hugged curves she usually hid. She did not look sick. She looked like she was ready for a gala. I dropped my bag, my hands trembling slightly. "Mom," I whispered, "you look well." She stopped on the bottom step and looked me up and down with eyes that could freeze water. There was no hug, no tears, no hello. Her first words to me after a year of separation were sharp enough to cut glass. "Why are you so late, Simone? We have been waiting on you for an hour. Look at you. You look exhausted. Go upstairs and change immediately. Riley just spit up all over the guest bed, and I need you to strip the sheets and start a load of laundry before the car gets here." I blinked, trying to process the disconnect between the weeping woman on the phone and the general barking orders in front of me. "Mom, you said you were sick. You said your heart was failing." Beatrice waved a manicured hand in the air as if swatting away a fly. "Oh, stop being dramatic. My palpitations were just stress." "And who causes me stress?" "You do. Being so far away making me worry. Now hurry up. The service is coming in 20 minutes, and I need those kids fed and changed before we leave. Sickness just means I need more help around here, not less so. Make yourself useful." Before I could even process my mother's dismissal, the kitchen door swung open with a violence that made the crystal chandelier tremble. Courtney marched into the foyer like she owned the deed to the property. My sister-in-law is a woman who believes volume is a substitute for personality, and entitlement is a birthright. She was clutching a binder that looked like a legal brief thick enough to stop a bullet. She did not hand it to me. She shoved it into my chest with such force that I had to stumble back a step just to keep from dropping it on my toes. "Here are the rules," she announced, her voice shrill and commanding without a single word of greeting. "Read them. Memorize them. If you break a single one, I will know." I opened the binder to the first page. It was laminated. I scanned the list and felt my eyebrows shooting up toward my hairline. No gluten, no dairy, no sugar, no red dye number 40, no screen time after 4 in the afternoon. Only alkaline water, specifically Fiji brand, chilled to exactly 40 degrees. They must be read to in French for 30 minutes before bed to stimulate their cognitive development. It went on for 15 pages of neurotic micromanagement. Courtney crossed her arms over her designer blouse, looking at me with a sneer that she probably thought passed for concern. "And listen to me clearly, Simone. Do not think you can feed my children that greasy soul food you and your mother are so fond of. My children have sensitive stomachs like me. They need clean-eating organic produce and grass-fed proteins. Not whatever deep-fried artery-clogging garbage you people eat." I felt the heat rise up the back of my neck. It was not just the rudeness. It was the casual racism wrapped in a fake concern for health. She was talking about the food that raised her husband, the food that built this family, with a disgust that made my stomach turn. She looked at me like I was a different species, something sturdy and unrefined, while she and her children were porcelain dolls that needed protection from my influence. She implied that my stomach was made of iron because I was less civilized than her. I closed the binder with a sharp snap. "I am not a chef, Courtney, and I am certainly not a French tutor." She rolled her eyes as if dealing with a slow child. "Just figure it out. That is what assistants do, right? We usually put the grocery expenses on Jamal's black card, but he said the chip is malfunctioning today, so you will need to cover the costs yourself. Consider it your contribution since you are staying here rent-free while we are gone. Keep the receipts if you want, but honestly do not nickel and dime us. It is tacky." She turned on her heel, hair swinging perfectly, leaving me standing there with a 15-page manual on how to raise her children and a demand to pay for the privilege. That is when I looked past her at the mountain of luggage by the door, and the realization hit me. This was not just a weekend getaway. This was an evacuation, and I was the cleanup crew. I stared at the mountain of luggage blocking the hallway. It was enough gear for a polar expedition, not a weekend visit. There were ski bags emblazoned with designer logos, hard-shell suitcases that cost more than a mortgage payment, and garment bags thick with fur coats. I looked from the bags to my mother, who was busy adjusting her diamond earrings in the foyer mirror, avoiding my gaze entirely. "Where exactly are you all going?" I asked, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Why is there enough luggage here to relocate a small village?" Beatrice smoothed the sequins on her gown and finally turned to me with an expression of mild annoyance, as if I were asking why the sky was blue. "We are going to Aspen, of course. The doctor said mountain air would be excellent for my heart palpitations. The humidity in Atlanta is simply dreadful for my condition this time of year." Jamal leaned back against the staircase railing, swirling his wineglass like a budget version of a Bond villain. 10 days on the slopes, sis. First-class tickets. We are staying at the Little Nell. It is going to be epic. The powder is supposed to be perfect this time of year, and I need to get my runs in. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, a physical reaction to the sheer audacity unfolding before me. "So let me understand this perfectly. You called me 3 weeks ago sobbing. You begged me to come home. You said you were dying. You made me fly across the Atlantic Ocean. And now you are leaving." Beatrice waved a hand dismissively. "We are not leaving you alone, Simone. You have the children. And the house. It is a big responsibility. We fired the nanny last week because she had the absolute nerve to ask for overtime pay. Can you believe the greed of people these days? So we need you to step in. It works out perfectly. You get to spend time in your childhood home, and we get the break we deserve." Jamal laughed, shaking his head at my stunned expression. "Do not look so shocked, sis. It is the least you can do. Do not be selfish. I have had a brutal year. The market has been volatile. I have been grinding day and night to provide for this family. I need to decompress. I need to recharge my creative energies. You are just an assistant. You can answer emails from the couch while you watch the twins. It is basically a vacation for you too." Selfish. He called me selfish. This man, who had not held a steady job since the Obama administration, was lecturing me on hard work. He was claiming he needed a break from spending money he did not have. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They did not miss me. They did not want to see me. They did not care if I was in London or Atlanta or the moon. They just did not want to pay for childcare. They had calculated the cost of a high-end nanny service for 10 days, realized it would cut into their champagne budget, and decided to import their daughter instead. I was not family to them. I was a cost-saving measure. I was a line item in their budget that they could delete to make room for more luxury. They stood there dressed in their finery, looking at me with expectant eyes, waiting for me to nod and say yes like I always did. They thought they had trapped me. But they forgot one thing. You do not trap the person who built the cage. I did not scream. I did not throw a tantrum like a child denied a toy. I simply looked at the people who shared my DNA and felt the last tether of obligation snap. It was a quiet sound, internal and final. I adjusted the strap of my purse and gripped the handle of my suitcase. "I am not doing this," I said. My voice was low but steady, the kind of voice I used in boardrooms when negotiations had failed, and it was time to walk away. "I did not fly across the ocean to be your servant. I came here to rest. I came here because you said you needed me. But clearly the only thing you need is free labor. Since you are all leaving, I am going to a hotel. I will not stay in this empty house and play nanny while you drink champagne." I turned toward the door. The heavy oak wood looked like freedom. But I only took 2 steps before the air in the room shifted from cold to volatile. Jamal moved with a speed that surprised me. He lunged across the foyer, his expensive dress shoes skidding on the marble. He grabbed the handle of my suitcase and yanked it back with such force that I stumbled. He did not just stop me, he threw the bag. It skidded across the polished floor and slammed into the wall with a sickening thud, scuffing the paint. "You are not going anywhere," he snarled. He planted himself in front of the door, his chest heaving, his face twisted into a mask of ugly entitlement. "Who do you think you are walking away from us? I am the oldest. I am the man of this house when Daddy is gone. And I am telling you that you are staying. You do what you are told, Simone. That is your job. That is all you are good for. Taking orders. So take this one. Put your bags down and get in that kitchen." I stared at him. This was not a brother. Oh. This was a bully who had never outgrown the playground. He was 38 years old and still throwing tantrums when he did not get his way. Then Beatrice joined the chorus. Her voice rose to a shriek that bounced off the high ceilings. "You ungrateful little wretch!" She marched over her sequins flashing under the chandelier. "Is this how you repay me? I carried you. I birthed you. I sacrificed my youth for you. And you want to leave me in a lurch. You want me to die. That is it, isn't it? You want the stress to stop my heart so you can finally be free of me." She clutched her chest theatrically, her eyes wide and wet with manipulative tears. "If you walk out that door, Simone, you are killing me. You are killing your mother. Do you want that on your conscience? Is it so hard to help your family? Is it so hard to be useful for once in your miserable life? Just stay here. Watch the children. Let us have this one moment of happiness. If you leave, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? Dead." I looked from Jamal's clenched fists to my mother's contorted face. They thought they were terrifying. They thought they held all the power because they knew my buttons. They had installed them after all. But they did not realize that the Simone who used to cry at these threats died a long time ago. The woman standing in front of them had handled warlords and corporate sharks. Two screaming narcissists in a foyer were nothing. I squared my shoulders. I did not reach for my bag. Instead, I reached into my pocket for my phone. Jamal crossed his arms and leaned back against the heavy oak door blocking my exit with his body. He checked his watch, a gaudy gold thing that I knew for a fact was a high-quality fake, and then looked back at me with a sneer that was pure arrogance. "You are wasting your time, and my patience, Simone," he said. "You cannot stop this train. The Onyx travel limousine is 5 minutes away. Do you even know what Onyx is? Of course you do not. It is for the elite. It is for people who matter. I am a Diamond VIP member. They treat me like royalty. They are sending a stretch SUV stocked with vintage champagne just to take us to the private terminal. So put your cheap bag down and get in the kitchen before I really lose my temper." He looked so proud of himself standing there in his designer coat that my mother had paid for. He really believed his own hype. He believed that he, Jamal, who had not paid a bill in his own name in 3 years, was a captain of industry worthy of white glove service. He did not know that the only reason he had that status was because I had added him to my family and friends list 5 years ago when I first acquired the company. He did not know that Onyx was not just a travel agency. It was my empire. It was my blood, sweat, and tears built from the ground up to serve the most demanding billionaires on Earth. And he was standing in my mother's foyer using my own creation to abuse me. I did not argue. I did not try to push past him. I simply reached into my trench coat pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it with my thumb and opened the administrative app that only 3 people in the world had access to. I scrolled through the user database until I found his name, Jamal Williams, status active, tier diamond, linked to account holder Simone Williams. I tapped the edit button. Jamal watched me, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Who are you texting, Simone?" "Your little boyfriend. Tell him to come pick you up in 10 days. You are busy right now." I ignored him. My thumb hovered over the terminate button. I selected the reason code from the drop-down menu. Fraud. Unauthorized use of corporate assets. Then I pressed confirm. A small loading circle spun for a second, and then a green checkmark appeared. Account terminated. All active itineraries cancelled. Refund method blocked pending investigation. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked at him. I waited. It took exactly 30 seconds. The silence in the hallway was thick and heavy, broken only by the sound of my mother tapping her foot impatiently on the marble floor. Then a loud, jarring ringtone cut through the air. It was Jamal's phone. He pulled it out, looking at the screen with a confused frown. "It is Onyx," he said, looking at Mom with a smug grin. "Probably calling to ask what champagne preference I have. I told you, Mama. VIP treatment. Watch this." He swiped the screen and put it on speaker so we could all hear his importance. "Hello, Mr. Williams." A cool professional voice filled the room. "We are calling to inform you that your Onyx membership has been permanently terminated, effective immediately due to flags for identity fraud and unauthorized account usage. Your transportation for this evening has been cancelled. Your flights to Aspen have been voided. Please do not contact us again, or we will be forced to involve legal counsel. Have a good evening." The line went dead. Jamal stood there, the phone still held out in front of him like a dead bird. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. The smug grin had slid off his face, leaving behind only naked shock. Beatrice looked from the phone to Jamal, her eyes wide with panic. "What did they say?" "Cancelled." "What do you mean cancelled? The car is almost here." I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. I looked Jamal right in the eye. "Onyx, huh?" I said, my voice soft and cold. "That is a shame. It is a really great service. But they have very strict rules about leeches." I smiled a smile that did not reach my eyes. "Too bad. I just banned you." Jamal stared at his phone screen, like it had just bitten him. The color drained from his face, leaving behind an ashy gray that clashed with his expensive turtleneck. He jabbed his thumb onto the redial button so hard I thought the glass might crack. He put the phone to his ear and started pacing the foyer, his free hand balling into a fist. "Who do you think you are talking to?" he screamed into the receiver before the other end even had a chance to speak. "I am Jamal Williams. I am a strategic partner. You do not cancel me. I cancel you. Do you hear me? Put your manager on the line right now, or I will have your job by morning." I leaned against the wall watching the performance. I had personally trained the crisis response team at Onyx. They dealt with Saudi princes throwing tantrums when their yachts were late. A broke man in Atlanta shouting about importance he did not possess was not going to rattle them. I could almost hear the cool, detached voice on the other end reciting the script I had written myself. Jamal stopped pacing abruptly. His eyes went wide. "Excuse me," he sputtered. "Do not you dare hang up on me. Do not you dare." He pulled the phone away from his ear and stared at it in disbelief. They hung up. They actually hung up on me. Courtney stepped forward, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. Her face was twisted in a mix of panic and fury. "What is going on, Jamal? You told me you were a shareholder. You told me you had equity in Onyx. How can they cancel the tickets of an owner? Call the CEO right now. Fix this." She turned to Beatrice, seeking an ally, but my mother looked like she was about to faint. Her hand was clutching her pearl necklace, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Jamal, this was supposed to be taken care of," she whispered. "My friends know I'm going to Aspen. I already posted the itinerary on Facebook." Jamal was sweating now. Beads of perspiration were forming on his forehead, ruining the carefully curated image of the wealthy heir. He looked from his wife to his mother, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "It is a glitch," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "It has to be a system error. Their servers are probably down. You know how technology is. It is just a mistake." He fumbled for his wallet, pulling out a sleek black credit card. It was heavy metal, designed to impress waiters and concierges. I knew exactly which card it was. It was a supplementary card attached to my mother's account, which was in turn funded by the allowance I sent her every month. An allowance I had frozen 10 minutes ago. "Do not worry, baby," he said to Courtney, his hands shaking as he opened the airline app on his phone. I will just rebook us right now. First class. Better seats. We will show them. I will buy the whole row. Just give me a second. He tapped furiously on the screen. I watched him enter the numbers. I watched him select the most expensive flights available for immediate departure. I watched the hope in his eyes as he pressed the purchase button. And then I waited for the inevitable fall. Jamal held the phone up like a trophy, his thumb hovering over the payment button. "Watch this," he said, his voice dripping with unearned confidence. "This is the difference between you and me, Simone. You create problems and I solve them with a single tap." He pressed the button with a flourish that was meant to be impressive. We all watched the screen. A little circle spun round and round. Jamal tapped his foot on the marble floor, impatient for his victory lap. "Any second now," he muttered. Then a bright red box popped up on the screen. It was not a confirmation number. It was a single word in bold capital letters that seemed to scream across the foyer. "Declined." The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like he might faint. He blinked rapidly as if his eyes were deceiving him. "That is impossible," he stammered. "I just paid off the balance last week. It must be a fraud alert. They are protecting me because the purchase is so large. See, that is top-tier security. That is how they treat VIPs." He pulled another card from his wallet. This one was platinum and heavy. He typed the numbers in with shaking fingers. He was sweating now, visible beads forming on his upper lip. "Try this one," he said to no one in particular, his voice rising an octave. "This is the backup, the emergency reserve. It never fails." He hit submit. The circle spun. The red box returned. Declined. Courtney let out a sharp breath that sounded like a tire deflating. "Jamal, what is going on? Why are your cards not working? Do not tell me you forgot to pay the bill again. My parents are expecting us." "Shut up!" Courtney Jamal snapped his hands, trembling so hard he almost dropped the phone. "I am handling it." He dug deeper into his wallet, pulling out a third card. It was a gold business card. "This one has an unlimited limit," he said, his voice desperate. He typed. He pressed the button. "Declined. Contact issuer." The phone slipped from his sweaty grip and clattered onto the floor. He stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. 3 cards. 3 rejections. The silence that followed was heavy with humiliation. Beatrice looked at her son with a dawning horror, her hands clutching her pearls. "Jamal," she whispered. "What did you do?" I walked over to the side table where a silver tea service had been set out for their pre-departure reception. The tea was lukewarm, but I poured a cup anyway. The clinking of the china sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. I took a sip and sat down on the velvet sofa, crossing my legs. "You can stop trying, Jamal," I said, my voice smooth and calm. "You could try every card in that wallet. You could try the ones in your sock drawer too. The result will be the same." He spun around to face me, his eyes wild. "You did this! You hacked my accounts! You froze my assets!" I took another sip of tea. "I did not hack anything. I just stopped paying the bill. You see, those are not your credit cards, Jamal. Those are supplementary cards, authorized user cards attached to Mother's primary account. An account that I have been funding for the last 10 years because neither of you has had a job since the last decade." Beatrice gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "That is not true. Jamal told me he opened those accounts for the business. He said he added me to build my credit score." "He lied, Mother," I said, setting the teacup down. "And here is the best part. Even if I had not frozen the funding, those cards would still be useless. You hit your credit limit 3 weeks ago. Do you want to tell them why, Jamal? Or shall I?" Jamal looked at the floor. He looked at the door. He looked anywhere but at me. "It was the watch," I said, pointing to his wrist. "That gaudy gold thing you are wearing. You charged $40,000 to Mother's card to buy it. You told her it was an investment. You told her it was a limited edition Patek Philippe. But we both know the truth, don't we? I saw the charge come through. I saw the vendor name. It was a shell company in Hong Kong known for selling high-quality replicas. You maxed out Mother's credit for a fake watch, Jamal, and now you cannot even buy a bus ticket, let alone a first-class flight to Aspen." Jamal stared at his wrist where the fake gold Patek Philippe glinted under the chandelier. The truth about the watch, a $40,000 lie bought with stolen credit, hung in the air like toxic smoke. His face contorted, shifting from embarrassment to a dangerous primal rage. He let out a guttural roar and lunged across the coffee table, his hands reaching for my throat. "You shut your mouth!" he screamed, spit flying. "You jealous witch!" I didn't flinch. I didn't even put down my teacup, because the front door burst open before he could take 2 steps. A man stepped into the foyer. He was 6'4", built like a linebacker, and wearing a suit that cost more than Jamal's entire wardrobe. This was Marcus, my head of security, who had been waiting in the black SUV outside. He moved with terrifying speed, intercepting Jamal mid-lunge. With one hand, he shoved my brother back so hard that Jamal flew backward and landed on the sofa next to our mother, bouncing like a rag doll. Beatrice shrieked, clutching her chest. "Who is this Simone? He's going to kill us!" Marcus ignored her. He calmly walked over to the coffee table and placed a thick, leather-bound dossier in front of me. He stood beside my chair, arms crossed, staring Jamal down with the impassive gaze of a man who had protected diplomats in war zones. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, opening the folder. "Right on time." Jamal was gasping for air, rubbing his chest where Marcus had shoved him. "You brought a goon into Mama's house. You're insane." "I brought protection," I corrected. "Because I know exactly who you are, Jamal. And now everyone else is going to know too." I pulled out a stack of papers and fanned them out on the table. They were detailed credit reports, bank statements, and legal notices. "Let's take a look at the King of Aspen's kingdom, shall we?" I picked up the first sheet. "This is your credit score. Or what's left of it. 420. You can't even rent a car with that, let alone buy a house." I tossed it onto his lap. He didn't move to pick it up. "And here," I said, holding up a bank statement, "is proof of your employment. Or lack thereof. You haven't received a paycheck in 26 months. You told Mama you were consulting for tech startups, but the only direct deposits in this account are transfers from Mama's pension fund." "That's a lie," Jamal shouted, though his voice wavered. "I have NDAs. I can't discuss my clients." "You don't have clients," I said, throwing another document down. "You have lawsuits. 3 of them. Chase, American Express, and Wells Fargo are all suing you for unpaid debts totaling over $80,000. You aren't a VIP, Jamal. You're a liability." I looked at Courtney. She was staring at the papers on the table, her face pale. "And that Range Rover outside?" I asked, looking at my sister-in-law. "The one he told you he bought with his bonus. It's a lease. A lease that is 3 months behind on payments. The repo man has been trying to serve him for weeks. That's why he parked it round the back." "You mock my job as an assistant," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "But at least I don't steal from my own mother's retirement to buy fake luxury goods for a wife I can't afford." Jamal looked at the dossier, then at his wife, then at his mother. The house of cards had not just fallen, it had been incinerated. And I was holding the match. Beatrice snatched the credit report from the table like it was burning her fingers. She scanned the red ink, the negative balances, and the history of defaults. I watched her face, waiting for the realization to hit, waiting for her to finally turn on the son who had bled her dry. But I underestimated the power of her delusion. Instead of slapping her son, she turned those cold eyes on me. Her defense mechanism kicked in instantly, protecting her golden boy at all costs. "It is just a rough patch," she insisted, her voice trembling, not with anger at him, but with disappointment in me. "He is an entrepreneur, Simone. Business has ups and downs. You know that better than anyone. You are clearly doing well for yourself. Look at these bodyguards. Look at your clothes. If you have so much, why are you letting your brother drown? Why are you so stingy? You are the sister. It is your job to lift him up when he stumbles." A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. It was a dry, hollow sound that seemed to suck the air out of the room. I walked slowly toward the fireplace, my heels clicking on the floor that I paid to polish. Help him. You ask me why I will not help him. Have you forgotten 10 years ago, mother? Have you erased it from your memory because it does not fit your picture of a happy family? Or do you just not care because it was my life that was ruined, not his? I was 22 years old. I had just received a full scholarship to grad school. It was my ticket out. It was my chance to be someone other than Jamal's little sister. And you called me crying in the middle of the night. You said Jamal was in trouble. You said bad men were coming for him because he bet on the wrong basketball games in Vegas. You grabbed my shoulders and begged me. You said if I loved you, I would save him. You said family sacrifices for family. So I did. I walked into the bursar's office the next morning and I withdrew every cent of my tuition money. I handed over my future to pay a bookie so your son would not have to face a consequence. And do you know what happened after that? I spent 4 years eating instant noodles in a cold apartment with no heating because I had to work 3 jobs to pay my way back into school. I lost 20 pounds because I could not afford groceries. I almost starved so he could keep driving a luxury car. And what did he do? I pointed a finger at Jamal, who was cowering on the sofa. He laughed at me. He called me broke. He mocked my cheap clothes and my small apartment while he was wearing shoes that my sacrifice bought. You watched me struggle for 4 years, and you never offered me a dime. You never said thank you. You just moved on to the next crisis. So do not talk to me about helping family. I have paid my dues in sweat and hunger. I have carried this dead weight long enough. I have been the safety net, the bank, and the scapegoat. But today is the limit. The Bank of Simone is closed permanently. And this time you are all going to have to learn how to swim on your own. Courtney did not rush to comfort her husband. She did not offer a supportive hand or a word of encouragement. Instead, she took a step away from him as if poverty were a contagious disease she was terrified of catching. The silence in the room was broken by a sound I had never heard from my poised, polished sister-in-law. It was a laugh, but it sounded like glass shattering. "You are broke," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "You are actually broke." Jamal reached for her hand, but she slapped it away with a look of pure revulsion. "Do not touch me," she hissed. "You lied to me. You looked me in the eye when we met at that gala and told me you were a senior investment director. You told me you managed a portfolio worth $50 million. Jamal stammered, trying to salvage the illusion. "Baby, listen, it is just a temporary liquidity issue. I have assets. I have potential." "You have nothing!" Courtney screamed, her face twisting into something ugly and unrecognizable. "I married you because I thought you were my ticket out of Savannah. I thought you were going to take care of me. I thought I was marrying a king, not a court jester with a maxed-out credit card." Beatrice gasped, clutching her chest. "Courtney, how can you speak to your husband that way? He loves you. He has given you everything." Courtney spun around to face my mother, and the mask finally fell off completely. "Oh, shut up, you delusional old woman. He gave me nothing but fakes and empty promises. And I should have known better. I should have listened to my father when he told me not to marry into this family." She looked around the foyer, her eyes filled with a cold, elitist disdain that made my skin crawl. "I tried to overlook it," she spat. "I tried to ignore where you came from. I tried to ignore the desperate way you people try to act like you belong in high society. Buying things you cannot afford, being loud and flashy, just to cover up the fact that you are nothing but raggedy pretenders trying to play dress-up." The air left the room. It was a microaggression so heavy it felt like a slap. She was saying that no matter how much money we had or pretended to have, we would never be good enough for her. Beatrice looked like she had been shot. She stared at the woman she had bragged about for years, the daughter-in-law she constantly compared me to, and saw a stranger. "You do not mean that," Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling. "You are just upset." "I mean every word," Courtney sneered. "I wasted 5 years on this fraud. I gave him 2 children because I thought they would be heirs to a fortune. And now I find out their father is just another statistic. A broke loser living off his mommy and his sister. It is pathetic." She turned back to Jamal, who was shrunk into the sofa looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Fix this, Jamal. I do not care how you do it. Beg your sister. Steal it. I do not care. But if you think I am going to live in poverty with you, you are out of your mind. I watched the scene unfold from my spot by the fireplace. It was brutal. It was cruel. And it was exactly what they deserved. The golden couple was just painted rust, and the paint had finally peeled away. The silence that followed Courtney's explosion was heavy enough to crush bones. Logic dictated that my mother should be furious at the daughter-in-law, who had just insulted our heritage and called us raggedy pretenders. Logic dictated she should be furious at the son who had lied to her face for years, but logic had never lived in this house. Beatrice looked at Courtney, who was panting with rage. She looked at Jamal, who was weeping silently into his hands, and then, slowly, mechanically, she turned her head to look at me. In her twisted version of reality, the problem was not the lie. The problem was the person who turned on the lights. Her eyes were not filled with realization or apology. They were filled with a hatred so pure it stole the breath from my lungs. She took a step toward me, her sequins shivering like armor. "Are you happy now?" she screamed, her voice cracking and losing its polished society veneer. "Look at what you have done. Look at this mess. Are you satisfied, Simone? Did you get what you wanted?" I stood my ground, my hands clasped behind my back. "I did not do this, Mother. The truth did this. I just stopped paying for the curtain to stay up." "You ruined everything," she shrieked, advancing on me. "We were happy. We were going to have a beautiful Christmas. We were going to be a family. But you had to come in here with your jealousy and your bitterness and tear it all down. You have always been jealous of him. You cannot stand that he has a wife who loves him and children who adore him, while you have nothing but a lonely office in London and a cold heart. You wanted to humiliate him. You wanted to destroy him because you cannot bear to see him shine." The accusation was so delusional it was almost funny. She truly believed that my refusal to be defrauded was an act of jealousy. She snatched a porcelain teacup from the side table. It was fine china, part of a set she loved more than she loved me. Her hand shook violently, and tea sloshed over the rim, staining her silver gown. She did not care. She drew her arm back, her face contorted into a mask of pure malice. "I hate you," she screamed. "I wish I had never had you." She hurled the cup straight at my face with a speed born of hysterical rage. It was aimed right at my temple. I did not flinch. I did not duck. I did not have to. Marcus moved with the fluid precision of a striking cobra. His hand shot out from his side, intercepting the projectile inches from my nose. He caught the cup out of the air with a soft thud of ceramic against palm. He did not even spill the dregs of the tea. The room froze. Beatrice stared at Marcus's hand, her mouth open in shock. Marcus slowly, deliberately placed the cup back on the saucer with a gentle clink. He stepped forward, placing his massive frame between my mother and me. "I would not recommend doing that again, ma'am," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave into a low rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. "That constitutes assault, and my client presses charges." I stepped out from behind my shield. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. She was panting her chest, heaving her eyes wide with the realization that she could not touch me anymore. "I have paid his gambling debts for 10 years, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria like a scalpel. "I paid his bail when he got arrested for fraud in Miami 3 years ago. Did he tell you about that? I paid for that suit he is wearing. I paid for the car in the driveway. And today was the limit. I am not the villain here, Mother. I am just the one who finally stopped signing the checks." Beatrice stared at the teacup Marcus had calmly placed back on the table. Her chest was heaving, her nostrils flared. The assault had failed, but her arsenal wasn't empty yet. She straightened her spine, pulling herself up to her full height, channeling every ounce of matriarchal authority she had wielded over me for 3 decades. She pointed a finger at the door, her hand trembling not with fear, but with righteous indignation. "This is my house," she bellowed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. I bought every brick of this place with my sweat and tears. I raised you here, I fed you here, and I will not have a daughter who disrespects her mother and sabotages her brother under my roof. You are a guest here, Simone, a guest who has overstayed her welcome. She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. You have a choice. You can open that app right now and fix this mess. You can transfer the money for the flight and the hotel into Jamal's account immediately. You can save your brother's marriage and give your mother the peace she deserves. Or you can leave. She paused for dramatic effect, letting the threat hang in the air like a guillotine. If you do not pay, you get out. Right now. Tonight. I do not care where you go. Sleep in the street for all I care. But I will not harbor a traitor. You are dead to me until you make this right. Jamal perked up from the sofa, sniffing back his tears. A sly smile crept onto his face. He knew this move. This was the nuclear option. The threat of exile had always worked before. Every time I had tried to set a boundary, the fear of losing my family had brought me back in line. He looked at Courtney and winked. Courtney crossed her arms and smirked, her confidence returning. They thought they had me. They thought I was still the little girl who was terrified of being alone on Christmas. Yeah, Simone, Jamal jeered, his voice gaining strength. You heard Mama. Pay up or get out. You think you are big time because you own a travel agency. But you are nothing without this family. You are just a lonely spinster with a checkbook. Nobody else wants you. So be a good little sister and fix this, or enjoy Christmas alone in a hotel room. Beatrice stood there, her chin high, waiting for me to crumble. She expected the tears. She expected the begging. She expected me to pull out my phone and transfer the funds just to keep the peace, just to be allowed to stay in the warmth of the family circle. I looked at them. The mother who would throw me away for a vacation, the brother who would bleed me dry and laugh about it, the sister-in-law who despised me. They were so sure of their power. They were so certain that their love was a prize I would pay any price to keep. I let the silence stretch. I let them savor their victory for just a few seconds longer. Then I reached into my purse, not for my phone, but for a folded piece of paper. I stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of my coat. I walked over to the fireplace where Beatrice stood like a queen guarding her castle. I did not look scared. I did not look sad. I looked bored. You are kicking me out, I asked quietly. Yes, Beatrice spat. Unless you pay. I nodded slowly. I looked around the foyer, taking in the grand staircase, the marble floors, the crystal chandelier. It was a beautiful house, a house fit for a successful family. That is interesting, Mother, I said. Because you cannot kick me out of my own house. Beatrice let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Your house. Have you lost your mind? I bought this house in 1995 with your father. My name is on the deed. My sweat is in the walls. You are delusional. I reached into my purse and pulled out a sleek blue folder. I opened it slowly, deliberately, and extracted a single document. It was a property deed, stamped and notarized, with the official seal of Fulton County. Actually, Mother, I said, walking toward her, your name was on the deed. Until 5 years ago. I held the document up so she could see it clearly. Do you remember the summer of 2018? Do you remember when the bank started sending those pink notices? Do you remember when the sheriff came to the door with an eviction warning? Beatrice's face paled. She took a step back. Jamal handled that. He said it was a mistake. He said he refinanced it. Jamal didn't refinance anything, I said, my voice hardening. Jamal stole the deed from your safe. He forged your signature, and he took out a second mortgage to fund his cryptocurrency investment, an investment that went to zero in 3 months. Jamal made a choking sound from the sofa. That's a lie, I fixed it. I paid them off. You defaulted, I corrected, not even looking at him. The bank foreclosed. They were 3 days away from putting a padlock on this door. You were going to be homeless, Mother. Homeless at 65 because your golden boy gambled away your security. Beatrice looked at Jamal. Is this true? She whispered. Her voice was trembling now. I stepped in, I continued. I bought the debt from the bank. I paid off the arrears, and then I bought the property outright. I put it under an LLC so you wouldn't be embarrassed. SIM Holdings. But make no mistake, I own every brick, every shingle, and every blade of grass on this property. You have been living here rent-free for 5 years because I allowed it. I handed her the deed. She took it with shaking hands. She read the name on the bottom line. SIM Holdings, LLC. Authorized signatory Simone Williams. The paper fluttered to the floor. Beatrice looked at me with a mixture of horror and awe. The daughter she had dismissed as a failure, as an assistant, as a doormat, was her landlord. So when you tell me to get out of my house, I said, stepping closer until I was towering over her, you are forgetting who holds the keys. I am not the guest here, Mother. You are. And guests can be evicted. The room spun with the weight of the revelation. Courtney was staring at Jamal with murder in her eyes. Jamal was curled into a ball, weeping, and Beatrice looked like her entire world had just collapsed. You own it, she stammered. But why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to break your heart, I said softly. I didn't want you to know that your son betrayed you. I wanted you to have your dignity, but you used that dignity to try and crush me. So now the truth is out. I looked at my watch. You have 59 minutes left to pack. The silence in the foyer was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb. My mother looked at the deed in her lap as if it were a death warrant. Her hands, the ones that used to strike me when I spoke out of turn, were trembling so violently the paper made a dry, rattling sound. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I did not see the imperious matriarch of Atlanta society. I saw a frightened old woman who had just realized she was standing on a trapdoor. You have 60 minutes, I said, my voice cutting through the quiet like a razor. It is currently 8:15. By 9:15, I want every single personal item belonging to you, Jamal and Courtney, out of this house. If you are still on the premises at 9:16, I will call the police and have you removed for criminal trespass. And given Jamal's current legal standing with his creditors, I doubt he wants to have a conversation with law enforcement. Beatrice let out a low, keen, a sound of pure devastation. Her legs gave out and she collapsed onto the vintage velvet settee she had spent months picking out. She slumped there, her silver sequins scratching against the upholstery. Her face, capable of launching 1,000 guilt trips, now slack with shock. My house, she whispered. My beautiful house. You stole my house. I did not steal it, I corrected her coldly. I salvaged it. I pulled it out of the fire your son threw it into. But you are welcome to try and explain that to the officers. I am sure they will be fascinated by the foreclosure notices from 5 years ago that I have saved in a digital archive. Jamal had turned a color I had never seen on a human face before, something between gray and green. He knew. He knew exactly what this meant. He knew that without this address he had nowhere to go. He knew that without my protection, the wolves he had been running from credit card companies, loan sharks, and angry investors would find him. He looked at me, and I saw the first flicker of genuine terror in his eyes. Sis, please, he stammered, his voice cracking. You cannot do this. It is Christmas Eve. It is freezing outside. Where are we supposed to go? We have the kids. You cannot put your own blood on the street in the snow. I looked at the pile of Louis Vuitton luggage that contained their ski gear and fur coats. The luggage that represented thousands of dollars they did not have. You have plenty of clothes, I said, gesturing to the bags. Put on a coat. As for where you go, that is not my concern. Maybe you can use those onyx points you thought you had. Oh, wait. Those are gone too. Courtney let out a shriek. This is illegal. You cannot evict us without notice. We have rights, squatters' rights. We have lived here for years. I turned to Marcus, who was checking his watch. Marcus, What is the legal status of a guest who has been asked to leave by the property owner? Marcus smiled an expression that did not reach his eyes. Once permission is revoked, they are trespassers. In the state of Georgia, refusal to leave private property after being ordered to do so is a misdemeanor. And since you have proof of ownership and no lease agreement exists, they have no standing. I looked back at Courtney. You have 55 minutes left, I said. I suggest you stop screaming and start packing. Unless you want the neighbors to see you being dragged out in handcuffs. I hear Mrs. Johnson next door loves a good scandal. That did it. The mention of the neighbors, the threat to their social standing, was the catalyst. Panic exploded in the room. Jamal stood up from the floor, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his expensive coat. He looked around the foyer, his eyes darting from the door to his mother to me. The panic was settling into a desperate cunning. He took a step toward me, his hands raised in a placating gesture that felt more like a threat. "Simone, listen to yourself," he said, his voice dropping into that smooth, manipulative tone he used when he needed money. "You are upset. I get it. We hurt your feelings. But this is crazy. You are not going to throw your own mother out into the cold on Christmas Eve. Think about what people will say. Think about the neighbors. Do you want Mrs. Johnson to see Mama being dragged out of her own home? It will destroy her reputation. It will kill her. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the daughter who murdered her mother over a plane ticket?" He was good. I had to give him that. He knew exactly where to aim. For 30 years he had used my guilt as a weapon. He had used my desire to protect our family's image to keep me in line. But he was aiming at a target that no longer existed. I checked my watch. 55 minutes, Jamal. "You are bluffing," he sneered, his mask slipping. "You do not have the guts. You have always been weak. You have always needed us to validate you. You kick us out and you will have nobody. You will be alone in this big empty house with your money and your bitterness. Is that what you want? To die alone?" I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. "I am not bluffing, Jamal. And I am not alone. I have a very capable team." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. It rang once. "Send them in," I said into the receiver. Jamal frowned. "Send who in?" The front door opened again, but this time, it was not a single bodyguard. 6 men in gray uniforms marched into the foyer. They carried large plastic bins and heavy-duty trash bags. They wore gloves. They did not look like movers who handled china with care. They looked like a cleanup crew at a crime scene. "These gentlemen are from Rapid Removal," I explained calmly. "I hired them an hour ago. Their instructions are simple. Anything that does not belong to the owner of the house goes into a bag. If it fits in a bag, it goes on the curb. If it does not fit, it goes on the truck. They are very efficient." Beatrice shrieked, scrambling up from the settee. "Do not touch my things! Do not you dare touch my crystal!" One of the movers, a burly man with a clipboard, looked at me. "Start in the living room, Ma. Start everywhere," I said. "Clear the common areas first, then the bedrooms. Leave the furniture. Take anything personal." The men moved with military precision. They began sweeping the foyer. The pile of Louis Vuitton luggage was the first casualty. 2 men grabbed the bags and marched them out the front door, dumping them unceremoniously onto the driveway. Jamal watched his ski gear disappear into the night, his mouth agape. "You cannot do this!" he screamed, lunging at one of the movers. "That is my property. That is a $5,000 snowboard." Marcus stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "The property is being removed from the premises, sir. You can collect it from the driveway. Or the landfill. Your choice." Jamal turned to me, his face purple with rage. "I will sue you. I will sue you for every penny you have. I will tell everyone what you did. I will ruin you." I looked at him coolly. "With what money, Jamal? You cannot even afford a lawyer. And as for ruining me, go ahead. Tell the world that your sister finally stopped letting you steal from her. See whose side they take." I turned to the lead mover. Be careful with the art on the walls, I said. That belongs to me. Everything else is trash. Courtney let out a wail as a mover picked up her diaper bag and tossed it into a black plastic sack. My specialized formula, she cried. My organic snacks. You should have thought about that before you handed me a binder, I said. You have 50 minutes. I suggest you start grabbing what you can carry, because once it is in a bag, it is gone. The chaos was absolute. The movers swarmed the house like locusts. Beatrice was running around trying to shield her vases with her body. Jamal was shouting threats that no one was listening to. And I stood in the center of the storm checking my watch. 49 minutes, I announced. Tick-tock. The energy in the room shifted from emotional chaos to cold industrial efficiency as the removal team went to work. These were not the kind of movers who wrapped china in bubble wrap or carefully folded sweaters. They were a cleanup crew. They moved like a swarm of gray locusts, sweeping through the living room with a terrifying lack of sentimentality. They snapped open heavy-duty black contractor bags with loud cracks that sounded like gunshots in the high-ceilinged foyer. They did not discriminate between the silk pillows Courtney had insisted on buying and the half-eaten snacks the twins had left on the floor. It all went into the same bags. I watched as one man scooped up an armful of Jamal's sneaker collection. These were shoes my brother had posted on Instagram hundreds of times, claiming they were rare collectibles worth thousands. The mover dumped them into a plastic bin with a dull thud, one shoe crushing another, the laces tangling together. Jamal made a strangled noise in his throat, a sound of pure impotence as he watched his status symbols being treated like landfill. He stepped forward to stop them, but Marcus simply shifted his weight and glared. Jamal froze. He was a bully, not a fighter. He knew better than to cross the line Marcus had drawn on the floor. But Courtney did not possess that same survival instinct. She was frantically running between the movers, trying to snatch items back from their grip. Her composure was completely gone, replaced by the feral desperation of a woman watching her identity being erased. Then she saw it. A large, burly mover had picked up her orange handbag from the console table. It was the Hermes Birkin she carried everywhere. The bag she claimed cost $20,000. The bag she used to look down on every waiter and shopgirl in Atlanta. No! She shrieked, the sound tearing through her throat. Put that down. That is a Birkin. That is worth more than your life. Do not you dare touch it. The mover did not even pause. He opened a black trash bag and dropped the orange purse inside along with a pile of dirty bibs and a plastic toy. Something snapped in Courtney. She launched herself at the man, her manicured nails curved into claws. She was screaming unintelligible curses, her face contorted into a mask of pure fury. She reached for the mover's face, intending to hurt him, intending to make him pay for touching her precious lie. She never made contact. Before her nails could scratch skin, a hand the size of a dinner plate caught her wrist mid-air. It was one of the security team members, a man who had stood silently by the door until this moment. He did not hurt her. He did not twist her arm. He simply held her there, suspended and powerless. It was the casual strength of a parent stopping a toddler from touching a hot stove. "Let me go!" Courtney screamed, thrashing against his grip. "That is my bag. You are stealing my bag." I walked over to them, my heels clicking on the floor. The security guard looked at me and I nodded. He released her wrist and she stumbled back, rubbing her arm and glaring at me with hatred. "It is not stealing, Courtney," I said, my voice flat. "It is trash removal. And honestly, they are doing you a favor." She looked at me, panting, her hair in disarray. "What are you talking about? That bag is an investment. Jamal bought it for me in Paris." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Jamal has never been to Paris, Courtney, and that bag has never seen the inside of an Hermes store. Look at the stitching. Look at the hardware. It is already tarnishing. It is a Canal Street fake, just like everything else in this house. Just like your marriage. Just like you." I gestured to the mover. "Keep going. If it is fake, it goes in the bag. If it is real, leave it." The mover nodded and continued his work. Courtney watched as the black plastic bag swallowed her fake life. She did not attack again. She just stood there shaking, realizing that I knew every secret she had tried so hard to hide. The bag was just leather and thread, but to her it was the shield that protected her from being ordinary, and I had just thrown it in the trash. Courtney stood frozen, watching the black trash bag swallow her fake designer life. The sound of the plastic rustling seemed to echo in the cavernous foyer. Then something in her eyes shifted. The panic and rage drained away, replaced by a cold, calculating survival instinct. She looked at Jamal, who was still uselessly arguing with a mover about his sneaker collection. Then she looked at me, standing calm and untouchable in my cashmere coat. Without a word, she crossed the room. But she did not walk towards her husband. She walked towards me. She threw herself onto the marble floor at my feet, her hands clasping together in a prayer-like gesture that was so theatrical it belonged on a soap opera stage. "Simone? Please," she wailed, her voice trembling with a sudden onset of fragility. "You have to help me. I did not know. I swear on my children's lives, I did not know he was stealing from your mother. I am a victim here too." She reached out to grab the hem of my coat, but Marcus stepped forward, his shadow falling over her. She flinched, but kept her eyes fixed on me, wide and wet with tears that I knew she could summon on command. "You are a good person, Simone," she sobbed. "I have always said that. I have always told Jamal he was lucky to have a sister like you. Do not punish me and the babies for his crimes. I will leave him. I will divorce him tomorrow. Just let us stay. Let us stay in the guest house. I will cook. I will clean. I will do whatever you want. Just do not throw us out on the street with him. He is a monster." I looked down at her, this woman who had sneered at my food an hour ago. This woman who had handed me a binder of rules and treated me like hired help. Now she was on her knees offering to be the servant she had tried to make me. It was pathetic. It was satisfying. But it was also a lie. I crouched down so my face was level with hers. The scent of her expensive perfume cloyed in the air. I looked deep into her eyes, searching for a shred of genuine remorse. I found only fear. "You always said I was a good person," I repeated softly. "Is that right? Is that what you told your friends in your group chat? The one titled, 'The Help'?" Courtney's breath hitched. Her eyes darted away, then back to me, her expression crumbling. "I know about the messages, Courtney," I whispered. "I know you called me the savage sister-in-law. I know you mocked my hair, my clothes, and my job. I know you told your friends that you were only tolerating the ghetto trash family because you thought we had money." Her face went slack. The tears stopped, instantly replaced by a look of pure terror. How she stammered. "How do you know that?" I smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile. "Because I own the data security firm your phone provider uses for cloud backups. And when you connected to my Wi-Fi 3 years ago, you agreed to my terms of service. I see everything." I stood up, dusting off my hands as if I had touched something dirty. "You do not want to stay here, Courtney. You want to stay near the money. But the money is mine, and you are evicted. Get out!" I said, my voice rising to fill the room. "Take your fake bag, your fake tears, and your fake marriage, and get out of my house." Courtney scrambled backward on the floor, crab walking away from me as if I were a fire. She looked at Jamal, who was staring at her with his mouth open, betrayed by the wife who had just thrown him under the bus. But she did not care. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed the hands of her confused, crying twins, and ran for the door, not even looking back at the man she had promised to love. The flashing blue lights cut through the windows, painting the foyer in a chaotic strobe of color. It seemed Mrs. Johnson and the rest of the prayer circle across the street had decided the screaming match was ruining their silent night. They had called the police. 2 officers stepped through the open front door, hands resting on their belts, eyes scanning the debris of the eviction. Jamal saw them and immediately transformed. The tears vanished. The fear was replaced by the performance of a lifetime. He rushed toward the officers, hands raised in a gesture of helpless victimhood. "Officers, thank God you are here," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. This woman has broken into our home. She has thugs throwing our property into the street. She is violent. She is dangerous. You need to arrest her right now. She is trying to steal my mother's house." The lead officer, a tall man with a name tag reading Sergeant Miller, looked from Jamal to me. I was standing by the fireplace, sipping my tea, while Marcus stood silently nearby, like a statue in a suit. "Is this true, Ma?" The officer asked. "Do you live here?" I set my teacup down. "I do not live here, officer," I said calmly. "I own here." Jamal let out a hysterical laugh. "She is lying. She is delusional. She is just an assistant. My mother has lived here for 20 years. Ask her. Mama, tell them." Beatrice looked up from the sofa, her face a mask of tragedy. "It is my house," she whispered. "I raised my children here. She has no right." Sergeant Miller looked confused. He stepped further into the room. "I am going to need to see some identification and proof of residence. Who is the homeowner?" I said. Marcus handed me the blue folder again. I walked over to the officer and handed him the deed along with my driver's license. "This is the property deed notarized and filed with the county," I explained. "The property is held by SIM Holdings LLC. I am the sole proprietor of that entity. These people are guests who have overstayed their welcome and have been asked to leave. They are currently trespassing." The officer opened the folder. He took out a flashlight and shone it on the documents. He compared the name on the license to the name on the deed. He checked the dates. He checked the seals. Jamal was bouncing on the balls of his feet, eager for the handcuffs to click around my wrists. "She forged it," Jamal spat. "She is a fraud. Check the system." Sergeant Miller lowered the folder. He looked at Jamal with a weary expression. "The paperwork looks in order, sir. It is a certified copy." He turned to me. "Ms. Williams, you are the legal owner." "Yes," I said. "And I want them removed. Immediately." The officer turned back to Jamal and Beatrice. "Folks, the owner has asked you to vacate the premises. This is a civil matter regarding the eviction, but since you have been asked to leave and are refusing, it becomes criminal trespass. You need to grab your things and go. Now." Jamal's jaw dropped. "But she is lying. You are not listening to me." "Sir," the officer said, his voice hardening, "I am looking at the deed. Unless you can produce a document that overrides this one, you have to leave. Do not make me ask you again." Beatrice let out a sob that sounded like a dying animal. She looked at the neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, their faces pressed against the wrought iron gate. Mrs. Johnson was watching. The deacon's wife was watching. The shame was absolute. "Come on, Mama," Jamal said, his voice defeated. "Let us go." They shuffled out the door, past the police officers, past the pile of black trash bags that held their possessions. I stood in the doorway and watched them go. The police lights illuminated their retreat, casting long shadows against the snow. They were not leaving as victims. They were leaving as trespassers in the life they thought they owned. The snow started falling just as the police cruiser pulled away, leaving my family shivering on the sidewalk. It was a picturesque Christmas Eve scene, ruined by the ugly reality of human greed. Courtney stood there, her designer coat pulled tight against the wind, her eyes burning with a fury that had nothing to do with the cold. She looked at Jamal, who was staring at the closed front door of the mansion he thought was his birthright. He looked pathetic. "You useless fraud," Courtney screamed, her voice cracking in the frigid air. "You promised me everything. You promised me the world. And what do you have? Nothing. You are a broke loser living off your mommy and your sister. I wasted 5 years on you. 5 years." Jamal turned to her, his face wet with tears and melting snow. "Baby, please. We can fix this. We can figure it out. I still have connections. I still have potential. We are a family. We have the twins." Courtney let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark. "A family? Do not make me laugh. You think we are a family. You think those are your kids." Jamal froze. The snowflakes settled on his eyelashes, melting into droplets. "What? What are you talking about? Of course they are my kids. They have my nose. They have my nose, you idiot, Courtney spat. And they have their real father's eyes. The silence on the sidewalk was heavier than the snow. Beatrice, who had been sobbing into a handkerchief, stopped. She looked up slowly, her eyes wide with a new kind of horror. Jamal stared at his wife, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "What did you say?" he whispered. "I said they are not yours," Courtney shouted, not caring that the neighbors were watching from their windows. "I was pregnant when I met you. My ex was a broke musician, and I needed a way out. I needed a provider. And then I met you, Mr. Senior Investment Director, Mr. Heir to the Williams fortune. I thought I hit the jackpot. I thought I found a rich sucker to raise another man's babies." She stepped closer to him, her face twisted in a sneer. "I lied about the due date, Jamal. I lied about everything. I needed a father for them, and I picked you because you were easy. You were so desperate to be important, so desperate to have a trophy wife that you did not even question the math. But now look at you. You are not a provider. You are a parasite, and I am done feeding you." Jamal staggered back as if she had punched him. "No," he moaned. "No, that is impossible. I love them. I raised them. You paid for them," Courtney corrected, "with your mother's money. But the money is gone. So the daddy act is over. I am taking them. I am taking them back to Savannah. My parents might be strict, but at least they are not homeless frauds." Beatrice let out a wail that pierced the night. "My grandbabies. Those are my grandbabies. You cannot take them. They are William's blood." "They are not William's blood, you old fool," Courtney snapped. "They never were. You have been doting on strangers. You have been spending your pension on another man's DNA." Beatrice clutched her chest, her face turning a terrifying shade of gray. The betrayal was absolute. Her golden son was a fraud. Her perfect grandchildren were a lie. Her entire legacy was a joke. She looked at Jamal, the son she had sacrificed her daughter for, and saw only a stranger. Courtney flagged down a passing Uber that had slowed to watch the spectacle. She grabbed the hands of the confused, crying twins and dragged them toward the car. Jamal tried to follow her, but she shoved him back into a snowbank. "Stay away from us," she hissed. "Do not call me. Do not look for me. You are nothing to us." She slammed the car door and the Uber sped away, leaving tire tracks in the fresh snow. Jamal lay in the drift, staring up at the dark sky, his life completely dismantled in the span of 5 minutes. Beatrice stood alone on the sidewalk, the snow covering her sequins like a shroud, her heart breaking under the weight of the truth. Beatrice stood rooted to the frozen pavement like a statue carved from ice. The snow fell on her bare shoulders, but she did not shiver because the cold she felt was entirely internal. For 5 years she had worshipped those twins. She had bought them Burberry coats before they could walk. She had set up trust funds with money she essentially stole from me. She had bragged to every deacon's wife at Ebenezer Baptist Church about the strength of the Williams bloodline and how her grandbabies had her eyes. And now she knew. They were strangers. They were the biological evidence of another man's legacy funded by her daughter's stolen labor. The realization shattered her more completely than the eviction ever could. Her hand went to her chest. At first I thought it was another performance, another dramatic clutch of the pearls designed to guilt us into submission, just like the heart palpitations she had faked to get me on a plane. But then I saw her face. The color drained away, leaving her skin the color of wet ash. Her mouth opened in a silent gasp as if the air had turned to solid glass. Her eyes rolled back, showing only the whites. Her knees buckled, not with theatrical grace, but with the heavy, uncontrolled, dead weight of a body shutting down. She crumpled into the snowbank with a soft thud that was terrifyingly silent against the howling wind. Mama Jamal whispered. He was still lying in the snow where Courtney had shoved him. He stared at his mother's prone form. He did not move. He did not crawl to her. He did not scream for help. He just lay there frozen in a state of infantile shock, waiting for someone else to fix it. He was a man who had never solved a real problem in his life, and now facing the ultimate crisis, he simply malfunctioned. He looked at her like she was a broken toy that he did not know how to repair. Courtney saw Beatrice fall. She looked at the woman who had defended her, pampered her, and bullied me for her sake. For a split second, I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, a moment where humanity might have won out. But then the headlights of the Uber swept across the scene, illuminating the disaster. Self-preservation kicked in with a vengeance. Courtney did not even look down at the dying woman. She grabbed the handle of the rear door and shoved the screaming, confused twins inside with a roughness born of panic. She dove in after them, shouting at the driver to go, before the door was even fully closed. The car tires spun on the slick road, spraying slush onto Beatrice's sequined gown. The Uber sped off, disappearing into the dark Atlanta night, taking the fake grandchildren and the fake wife away forever. Jamal was left alone in the cold with his dying mother, and he still had not moved. He was staring at the taillights of the car, watching his last chance at a free ride drive away, while the woman who birthed him gasped for her last breaths in the snow. I watched it all from the bay window of the living room, my hand pressed against the cold glass. I saw the fall, I saw the abandonment, and I saw the utter uselessness of the golden child. I stood by the window watching my mother collapse into the snow. For a fleeting second, a dark part of me wanted to turn away. She had made her choices. She had chosen the son who stood uselessly beside her over the daughter who had paid for everything. She had chosen the fantasy over the reality. But as I watched her chest heave in the frigid air, something deeper than anger stirred. It was not love exactly. It was duty. It was the last vestige of the daughter I used to be, the one who fixed things. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. My voice was calm, detached as I gave the address and described the symptoms. Female 65, unconscious, possible cardiac event. Send an ambulance. I hung up before they could ask me to stay on the line. I did not want to comfort them. I just wanted them to do their job. I walked to the front door and opened it. The cold air hit me, but I did not button my coat. I stepped out onto the porch and walked down the driveway, my boots crunching on the snow. I did not run. I did not rush to her side and weep. I walked with the steady pace of a CEO arriving at a merger meeting. Jamal looked up at me, his eyes wide and terrified. "Help her!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "She is dying. Do something!" I ignored him. I looked down at Beatrice. Her skin was gray, her breathing shallow and ragged. She looked small, broken, a sequined doll discarded in the trash. I did not kneel. I did not hold her hand. I stood over her like a sentinel waiting for the professionals. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, cutting through the winter silence. The ambulance pulled up, lights flashing red and white against the snow. 2 paramedics jumped out, bags in hand. I pointed at Beatrice. "She collapsed about 3 minutes ago," I said, my voice flat. "History of high blood pressure and stress-induced palpitations, possible heart attack." The paramedics went to work immediately, checking vitals, starting an IV, loading her onto a stretcher. They moved with practiced efficiency, ignoring the sobbing man in the designer coat who was trying to grab his mother's hand. I watched them work, my face a mask of indifference. When they had her stabilized and were loading her into the back of the ambulance, one of the paramedics looked at me. "Are you coming with us, ma'am?" I shook my head. "No." I pointed at Jamal, who was hovering by the open doors looking lost. "He is going. He is the son." Jamal looked at me, panic flaring in his eyes. "Me? I cannot go. I do not have my wallet. I do not have my car. How will I get back?" "That is not my problem," I said, cold as the ice under my feet. "You wanted to be the man of the house, Jamal. You wanted to be the favorite. Well, here is your chance. Go be a son. Hold her hand. Tell her everything is going to be okay." He hesitated, looking from the ambulance to the warm house he had been evicted from. "But I do not have any money," he whispered. I leaned in close so only he could hear me. Then you better hope she has good insurance, because I am not paying a dime, not for the ambulance, not for the surgery, not for the recovery. You spent 10 years bleeding her dry. Now it is your turn to bleed. Go. I shoved him toward the ambulance. He stumbled and the paramedic grabbed his arm, pulling him inside. The doors slammed shut. The siren wailed again, and the ambulance sped off into the night, taking my mother and her golden child away. I stood alone in the driveway, the snow falling softly around me, covering the tracks of their departure. I took a deep breath of the cold, clean air. I did not feel sad. I felt light. I turned and walked back into my house, closing the door firmly against the cold. The waiting room of the St. Jude Medical Center was not designed for tragedy. It was designed for comfort. The walls were painted a calming sage green, and the chairs were upholstered in Italian leather that cost more than most people's cars. It was a place where wealthy people came to fix their problems quietly. I walked in the sound of my heels muffled by the plush carpet. Jamal was standing at the reception desk, his designer coat now stained with melting snow and road slush. He was arguing with the receptionist, a woman named Patricia, who wore pearls and a look of practiced patience. I stepped up beside him. "What is the problem?" I asked, my voice cutting through his frantic whispering. Jamal jumped. He looked at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and terrified. "There is a mistake," he stammered. "A clerical error. They are saying Mama is not covered." I looked at Patricia. "My mother has been a platinum member of the Health Shield network for 20 years. I pay the premiums myself. It is a direct debit from her main account. There should be no issue." Patricia looked at me with sympathy, but her fingers did not stop typing. "I see the history, Ms. Williams. The premiums were indeed paid automatically until 6 months ago, but on June 15th the policy was cancelled. Not for non-payment. It was a voluntary termination. The cash value of the life insurance component and the medical savings account were liquidated and withdrawn in full." I felt the air leave my lungs. Liquidated. That account had over $200,000 in it. It was her safety net. It was her end-of-life care. It was the money meant to keep her comfortable when her heart finally gave out. Who authorized the withdrawal? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The cold knot in my stomach tightened into a block of ice. Patricia turned the screen slightly. The authorization was signed by Beatrice Williams and countersigned by her power of attorney, Jamal Williams. The funds were transferred to an external account labeled Crypto Future Holdings. I turned slowly to look at my brother. He was shrinking into himself, trying to disappear into the collar of his coat. He did not look like a man. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the belt. Crypto Future. I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "You cashed out Mother's medical insurance for a crypto scam." Jamal started to cry. Ugly, wet sobbing that drew stares from the other people in the waiting room. "It was a sure thing, Simone," he blubbered. "My friend told me it was going to the moon. I was going to double it. I was going to pay it back before she even noticed. I wanted to buy her a new house. I wanted to surprise her." "You wanted to surprise her," I said. "Well, you certainly did that. You surprised her with a heart attack, and now you have surprised her with bankruptcy." "That platform collapsed 3 months ago, Jamal. It was a Ponzi scheme. Everyone knows that. You lost everything, didn't you?" He nodded, his head hanging low. "Every dime." Patricia cleared her throat. "Ms. Williams, I am afraid without valid insurance we cannot admit her for the surgery. This is a private facility. We require a deposit of $50,000 up front for uninsured patients, or we will have to transfer her to the county hospital." The county hospital. The place where people waited in hallways for days. The place Beatrice had spent her entire life looking down on. She was lying on a gurney behind those double doors, dying and destitute because her golden child had bet her life on a digital coin that did not exist. I looked at Jamal. "Fix it," I said. "You are the power of attorney. You are the investor. Pay the lady." "I cannot," he whispered. "I have nothing." I looked at Patricia. "Transfer her," I said. Jamal's head snapped up. You cannot do that. She will die in the ambulance. You have money. You can pay it. I agreed. But I won't. You made this bet, Jamal. Now you have to watch the payout. The automatic doors of the St. Jude Medical Center waiting rooms slid open with a pneumatic hiss that cut through the sterile silence. 4 uniformed officers marched in. They did not look like they were there for a checkup. They moved with the heavy, purposeful stride of men who had a target. Jamal was sitting in one of the leather chairs, his head in his hands, muttering to himself about crypto markets and bad luck. He did not even look up until the shadow of the lead officer fell across his expensive Italian loafers. Jamal Williams, the officer barked. It was not a question. Jamal jumped, his eyes wide and bloodshot. Yes. Is it my mother? Is she okay? The officer pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. The metal caught the fluorescent light with a cold glint. This is not about your mother, son. You are under arrest for 20 counts of identity theft, wire fraud, and credit card forgery. Stand up and turn around. Jamal scrambled back into the chair, pressing himself against the leather as if he could merge with the upholstery. What? No. You have the wrong person. I am a businessman. I am an investor. You are a thief, the officer said, grabbing Jamal's arm and hauling him to his feet. We picked up your wife, Courtney, at Hartsfield-Jackson International an hour ago. She was trying to board a flight to Savannah with 2 children and a suitcase full of jewelry she could not explain. Jamal froze. Courtney, you arrested Courtney. She was very cooperative, the officer said, snapping the first cuff onto Jamal's wrist. Once we told her she was looking at accessory charges, she started talking. She told us everything. She told us about the credit cards you opened in her name. She told us about the loans you took out using her social security number without her knowledge. She even gave us the passwords to your laptop. She sold you out to save herself, Mr. Williams. The betrayal hit Jamal harder than the handcuffs. His knees buckled and the officer had to hold him up. She did what he whispered. She snitched. She sure did, the officer said, tightening the second cuff. She said you ruined her credit and she was not going down for your mistakes. Now let us go. Jamal looked wild. He looked around the room, desperate for a lifeline. His eyes landed on me. I was sitting 3 seats away, watching the scene with the detached interest of someone watching a nature documentary about predators eating their prey. Simone, he screamed, lunging toward me until the officer jerked him back. Simone, call your lawyer. Call Marcus. You own a crisis management firm. Manage this. You cannot let them take me. I am your brother. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had stolen my tuition money. The man who had mocked my job. The man who had left our mother to die in the snow. Simone, please. He wailed, tears streaming down his face. Do not just sit there. Do something. Save me. I reached into my purse. Jamal's face lit up with hope. He thought I was reaching for my phone. He thought I was going to make the call that would make this all go away. Instead, I pulled out a pair of noise-canceling headphones. They were Onyx brand, top of the line, capable of blocking out even the loudest jet engine. I placed them over my ears. I pressed the power button. The world instantly went silent. Jamal's screaming became a mime performance. I saw his mouth opening and closing. I saw the veins bulging in his neck. I saw the officers dragging him toward the door. But I heard nothing. I selected a playlist on my phone. Smooth jazz filled my ears, replacing the ugly sound of my brother's downfall. I picked up a magazine from the table and started reading. I did not look up as they dragged him out the automatic doors. He was gone. And the silence was beautiful. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the recovery room. It was a rhythmic, mechanical pulse that filled the silence where a family bond should have been. I sat in the hard plastic chair next to the bed, watching the rise and fall of Beatrice's chest. In my hand I held a red, delicious apple and a small paring knife I had retrieved from the fruit basket the hospital administration sent over once they realized who I was. I brought the knife to the skin of the fruit and began to peel. One long, continuous ribbon of red skin falling away to reveal the pale flesh underneath. Beatrice stirred. Her eyelids fluttered and then opened. She looked around the room, confused by the sterile white walls and the tubes running into her arms. Then her eyes landed on me. For a second I saw fear. She remembered the snow. She remembered the eviction. But then the old programming kicked in. The survival instinct of a narcissist who realizes she is in a vulnerable position. Her face softened into a mask of pathetic gratitude. "Simone," she croaked, her voice raspy from the intubation. "You are here. I knew it. I knew you would not leave me. You are a good daughter. You always were the good one." I did not look up from the apple. I just kept peeling. The knife made a soft, scraping sound. "Where is Jamal?" she asked, trying to sit up but failing against the weight of her own weakness. "Where is my baby? Is he outside? Is he cold? You have to let him in, Simone. He is sensitive. He is warm now, Mother." I said, my voice flat and calm. "He is indoors." She let out a sigh of relief. "Oh, thank God. I knew you would not abandon him. I knew you would fix it. You were just angry." "I understand. We pushed you too far. But we are family. We forgive. Bring him in. I want to see him." I sliced a piece of apple and popped it into my mouth, chewing slowly. "You cannot see him, Mother. Visitation hours are over. And even if they were not, I doubt they would let you travel downtown in your condition." She frowned, confusion clouding her eyes. "Downtown? What is he doing downtown? Is he at a hotel? Did you get him a room at the Ritz?" I swallowed the apple. "No, he is at the Fulton County Jail. He is currently being processed for identity theft and credit card fraud. Courtney turned him in at the airport. She gave the police everything. His laptop, his passwords, the records of every dime he stole from you and from me. He is facing 20 years, Mother. And bail has been denied." Beatrice made a sound like a wounded animal. "No. No, that is a lie. You are lying to hurt me. He is a businessman. He is an investor. He is a con artist," I corrected. "And he is finally where he belongs. In a cage." She started to cry. It was the same performance I had seen 1,000 times. The shaking shoulders, the wailing about how unfair the world was to her precious boy. "Simone, you have to help him. You have the money. You have the lawyers. Call your firm. Make this go away. He is your brother. He made a mistake. Please, baby, do it for me. I know you love me. I know I am your favorite. You always took care of me." I stopped peeling the apple. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the woman who had ignored my birthday to buy Jamal a car. I saw the woman who had watched me starve in college while she went on cruises. "You do not think I love you, Mother," I said softly. "You think I am an ATM. You think I am a resource. You love what I can buy. You love that I fix the problems Jamal creates. But the machine is out of order. The PIN code has been changed, and the card has been swallowed." I stood up and dropped the rest of the apple into the trash can. It landed with a heavy thud. "You are alive," I said. "The surgery was successful. That is the extent of my charity. Do not ask me for anything else, because the answer is no. Save your tears for the judge. You might need them when they call you to testify against your son." I reached into my leather tote bag and pulled out a thick stack of papers stapled together at the top corner. The pages were crisp and white, contrasting sharply with the gray hospital blankets. I placed them on the tray table in front of Beatrice. She looked at them with bleary eyes, not understanding what she was seeing. "This is the itemized bill for your surgery and your stay in the intensive care unit," I said, my voice steady and devoid of warmth. "Private cardiac surgery is expensive, Mother. The anesthesia alone costs more than your first car. The total comes to $82,000. And since Jamal canceled your insurance to fund his imaginary empire, this is all out of pocket." Beatrice waved a weak hand at the papers. "Just pay it, Simone. Stop being dramatic. You know I will pay you back when my pension comes in next month." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound, I pulled out a second document. It was a bank statement printed this morning. I held it up so she could see the bottom line. The number was printed in bold black ink. 0.00. You have no pension, I said. Jamal accessed your retirement accounts 3 months ago. He forged your signature on a lump sum withdrawal request. He took it all: the savings, the pension, the emergency fund, even the rainy day jar you kept in the kitchen. It is all gone, every single cent. You are destitute. Beatrice stared at the paper. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The reality was too big to swallow. She had spent her life feeling superior, feeling secure in her financial status, and now she was poorer than the people she used to look down on. I leaned in closer, my hands resting on the bed rail. I want you to listen to me very carefully because I am only going to say this once. For 30 years, I chased your validation. I got straight A's. I built a company. I bought you cars and clothes and trips to Europe. I did everything to make you look at me the way you looked at Jamal. But it never worked, because you do not love me. She started to protest, her voice weak. Simone, that is not true. It is true, I cut her off. You do not love me. You love what I do for you. You love the convenience of me. You love the safety net I provide. I was never a daughter to you. I was an ATM. I was a machine that dispensed cash and solutions whenever you pushed the buttons of guilt and obligation. But I have news for you, Mother. The machine is out of service. The screen is dark. The cash is gone. I stood up and smoothed my coat. So here is the question that will define the rest of your life. Now that the money is gone, now that I have locked the vault, do you still love me? Can you look me in the eye and tell me you love me when my hands are empty? Beatrice looked at me. Then she looked at the bill. Then she looked away toward the window. The silence stretched out, filling the room with a suffocating weight. She could not say it. Without the transaction, without the payoff, she could not find the words. The realization settled over her like a shroud. I watched it happen. I watched her realize that she had bet on the wrong horse, and now the race was over. She had no house because I owned it. She had no money because Jamal stole it. She had no son because he was in a cell. She had no grandchildren because they were never hers to begin with. And now, because she could not lie to me one last time, she had no daughter either. She was a queen without a kingdom, sitting in a hospital bed. She could not afford waiting for a future that did not exist. I stayed standing by the bed, looking down at the woman who had given me life, but had never quite known how to keep me safe. The silence in the room was thick, heavy with the truths we had buried under decades of pretense. I was not done yet. There was one more thing I needed to say, one more ghost I needed to drag out of the closet before I walked out that door forever. I want to talk about the summer of 1998. I said, my voice low and steady. I was 15 years old. Do you remember that summer, Mother? It was a hot July. The air conditioner was broken, and we were all miserable. But I was in more pain than anyone. Beatrice shifted her eyes to me. There was a flicker of recognition, a shadow of fear crossing her face. She knew where this was going. She tried to look away, but I moved to the other side of the bed, forcing her to meet my gaze. It started on a Tuesday, I continued. A sharp pain in my side. It felt like someone was twisting a hot knife inside my gut. I curled up on the rug in the living room and I cried. I begged you to take me to the doctor. I told you something was wrong. Something was breaking inside me. And do you remember what you said? Beatrice's breath hitched. A tear slid from the corner of her eye, tracking a path through the wrinkles on her cheek. You told me to stop being dramatic, I said. You told me it was just cramps. You gave me 2 aspirin and told me to go to your room and sleep it off. You said we did not have the money for an emergency room visit. You said the deductible was too high. I leaned in closer, my hands gripping the cold metal rail of the bed. But that was a lie, wasn't it? We did have the money. You had $600 in the envelope in your dresser drawer. I knew it was there because I had seen you counting it that morning. But that money was not for me. That money was for Jamal. Beatrice closed her eyes tightly, squeezing out more tears, but I did not stop. It was for his basketball camp, I whispered. The elite skills camp in North Carolina. He had to go because the scouts were going to be there. He had to go because he was the star. He was the future. And my appendix was just an inconvenience. You gambled my life against his jump shot. I waited 2 days, I said, letting the memory wash over me. 2 days of agony. I was vomiting bile. I was burning up with fever. I was screaming into my pillow so I would not disturb you. And finally, on Thursday morning, I collapsed on the bathroom floor. I passed out from the pain. You had no choice then. The neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, heard me screaming and came over. She was the one who drove me to the hospital, not you. She was the one who held my hand while they prepped me for surgery. I pulled up my shirt just an inch to reveal the faded, jagged white line on my abdomen. The doctor told you that if we had waited 1 more hour, I would be dead. My appendix had ruptured. Gangrene had set in. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital fighting an infection that should never have happened. And the whole time you sat by my bed, you were not crying because you were scared for me. You were crying because the hospital bill meant Jamal could not go to camp. Beatrice was shaking now. Her mouth opened and closed, trying to form words, trying to find an excuse. But there were none. The memory was too clear, too brutal. The guilt she had pushed down for 20 years was finally suffocating her. You almost killed me, I said, standing up straight and pulling my shirt back down. You looked at your suffering daughter and you chose your son's hobby. That was the day I stopped being your child. That was the day I realized I was just an accessory in the Jamal show. So do not look at me with those sad eyes. Do not ask me for mercy. You used up all your mercy that summer. You saved the money for him, so let him save you now. I sat in the sterile hallway of the hospital, watching the clock on the wall tick away the minutes of my former life. The silence was broken by the sound of frantic footsteps. I did not need to look up to know who it was. The rhythm of those heels was familiar. It was the sound of entitlement running out of options. Courtney came around the corner. She looked nothing like the polished socialite who had sneered at my furniture just hours ago. Her hair was a mess, her mascara was smeared down her cheeks, and she smelled faintly of the holding cell she had just been released from. She was out on bail, but she was still a prisoner of her own greed. She spotted me and rushed over, breathless and frantic. "Simone?" She gasped, throwing herself into the empty chair beside me. "Thank God you are still here. It has been a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. They fingerprinted me. They took my mugshot. Me. Can you imagine?" She reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled it away calmly, placing it in my lap. She did not even notice the rejection. She was too busy launching into her pitch. "I did what you wanted," she said, her eyes wide and pleading. "I told them everything. I gave them the passwords. I gave them the bank records. I testified against him, Simone. I put Jamal away. I did that for you. I helped you take down the bad guy. So now we are even, right? We are allies." I looked at her. She actually believed that betraying her husband erased her own crimes. She thought she could trade a husband for a sister-in-law and keep the cash flowing. "I have nowhere to go," she whined, dropping her voice to a whisper. "The police seized the accounts. The twins are with a social worker until I can prove I have a stable residence. I need money, Simone. Just a bridge loan. Enough for a hotel and a lawyer. You owe me this. I saved you the trouble of testifying." I sighed. It was a long, weary sound. I reached into my tote bag. Courtney's eyes lit up. She thought I was reaching for my checkbook. She thought the ATM was back online. Instead, I pulled out a plain manila envelope. It was not sealed. I held it out to her. "What is this?" she asked, taking it with trembling hands. "Is it cash? Is it a voucher?" "It is the truth," I said simply. "Open it." She pulled out the document. It was a single page with a lot of numbers and a very clear graph at the bottom. She stared at it, and I watched the blood drain from her face, leaving her looking like a wax figure. "You see, Courtney," I said, my voice smooth and low. "I never trusted you, even before today. You were too eager to marry a man with no job. So a few months ago, I hired a private investigator. He managed to get a DNA sample from the twins during a playdate, and he compared it to Jamal's DNA from a hairbrush. Courtney dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up. The words 0% probability stared back at us. They are not his, I said. And you knew it. You pinned another man's children on my brother because you thought he was rich. You let my mother spend her pension on children that do not share a single drop of her blood. You are not a victim, Courtney. You are a predator. She started to stammer, backing away from me. It is not like that. We were on a break. I thought they were his. Stop lying, I cut her off. The test confirms they are identical twins from a single father, and that father is not Jamal. So here is my advice. Go find the man who actually helped you make them. Go find the broke musician, or the bartender, or whoever it was. Ask him for money, because I do not have a nephew, I do not have a niece, and I certainly do not have a sister-in-law. I stood up and walked past her. You are not family, Courtney. You are just a stranger who trespassed in my life for 5 years. Do not follow me. Do not call me. If you step foot on my property again, I will send this DNA report to the judge handling your fraud case. I imagine proving you lied about the paternity will not help your character defense. Goodbye. I did not leave the hospital lobby. Instead, I made a phone call that I had been planning in the back of my mind for years. 20 minutes later, a man in a rumpled suit rushed through the automatic doors, clutching a leather briefcase. It was Mr. Henderson, a local real estate investor known for buying properties for cash. He looked nervous. He knew the value of the estate on Highland Drive, and he could not believe the price I had quoted him over the phone. I sat at a small round table in the hospital cafeteria and signed the papers. I did not negotiate. I did not ask for a counteroffer. I sold the house my mother loved more than her own children for 30% under market value. I wanted it done. I wanted the asset liquidated immediately. Mr. Henderson's hand shook as he handed me the cashier's check. He thought he was robbing me. He did not realize I was paying a small price to buy my freedom. I walked back up to the recovery room. Beatrice was awake, sipping water from a plastic cup. She looked up, hoping to see Jamal, hoping to hear that I had hired a dream team of lawyers to free him. Instead, I placed a brochure on her chest. "What is this?" she asked, squinting at the glossy paper. "It is your new home," I said. "It is called Pine Creek Assisted Living." Beatrice frowned. Pine Creek? I have never heard of it. Is it near the country club? Is it the one with the heated pool and the chef? I shook my head. No, Mother. That is Silver Leaf. You cannot afford Silver Leaf. Pine Creek is in Decatur. It is a very respectable facility. They have bingo on Tuesdays and a van that takes residents to Walmart on Saturdays. You will have a roommate. Her name is Mrs. Gable, and I hear she loves soap operas. Beatrice dropped the brochure like it was on fire. A roommate. Walmart. Have you lost your mind? I am not going to a nursing home. I am going home to my house. You do not have a house, I said calmly. I just sold it. She gasped, clutching the sheets. You what? You cannot do that. That is my sanctuary. It was my asset, I corrected, and I sold it to pay for your life. I held up the receipt from the hospital billing department. I just paid your $82,000 surgery bill, and I took the rest of the money and paid for 12 months of care at Pine Creek. I leaned over the bed. This is it, Mother. This is the last check I will ever write for you. You have a roof over your head. You have 3 meals a day. You have medical supervision. That is more than you gave me when I was sick. That is more than you deserve. Beatrice started to weep, real tears this time. Tears of a woman realizing she was about to trade her silk sheets for polyester and her champagne for apple juice. You are abandoning me, she sobbed. You are throwing me away. I am not throwing you away, I said, standing up. I am setting you up. You have exactly 1 year, 12 months to figure out your next move. 12 months to reflect on how you treated the daughter who just saved you from being homeless. I picked up my purse. If I were you, I would start making friends with Mrs. Gable. Because when that year is up, the account is closed. You are on your own, Beatrice. I walked to the door. She called my name one last time, her voice small and broken. Simone, please. I did not turn around. I kept walking down the hallway past the nurse's station and out into the cool night air. I had no house. I had no family. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely full. I sat on the cold metal stool and waited for the guards to bring him in. The visitation room smelled of bleach and despair, a stark contrast to the lavender-scented hallways of our mother's former home. When Jamal appeared on the other side of the thick plexiglass, he did not look like a man who had learned his lesson. He looked like a cornered rat who still thought he had claws. He snatched the receiver off the wall and glared at me, his eyes burning with the same entitled rage that had fueled him for years. "You think you have won," he hissed into the phone. "You think this is over. As soon as I get a lawyer, I am going to sue you for everything. I will claim coercion. I will claim you set me up. I will take your company, Simone. I will leave you with nothing, just like you did to me." I did not interrupt him. I let him vent. I let him pour out his empty threats until he ran out of breath. Then I calmly lifted a single piece of paper from my bag and pressed it against the glass. Jamal stopped. His eyes scanned the document. It was a forensic accounting report from his last employer. The job he swore he left because of creative differences. "I know why you really left Global Tech," I said, my voice steady. "You did not quit. You were fired for embezzling $50,000 from the petty cash fund. They did not press charges because they wanted to avoid a scandal. But they kept the receipts, and now I have them." Jamal's face went pale. The arrogance evaporated, leaving behind only naked fear. "This is your insurance policy, Jamal," I said. "If you ever try to contact me, if you ever send a letter, if you ever mention my name to a lawyer or a reporter, this file goes directly to the district attorney. That is another 10 years added to your sentence. Do we understand each other?" He slumped against the wall, the receiver sliding from his hand. He nodded slowly, defeated at last. I hung up the phone and walked out of the jail without looking back. The heavy steel door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in my life, I was truly free. The room at Pine Creek was painted a color that could only be described as depression beige. It was narrow and cramped, with a thin curtain separating Beatrice from Mrs. Gable, who was currently snoring loud enough to rattle the plastic water pitcher on the nightstand. Beatrice sat on the edge of the twin mattress. The sheets were scratchy polyester blends that snagged against her pantyhose. There was no silk here, there was no crystal, there was only the hum of the vending machine down the hall, and the realization that this was her life now. Desperate for a connection to her old world, she reached for her cell phone. She dialed Gladys Johnson, the head of the church prayer circle. She was ready to launch into her performance. She was ready to cry about her ungrateful daughter and the tragedy that had befallen her noble family. She needed the sympathy. She needed to be told she was a saint. Gladys answered on the third ring. Her voice was not warm. It was as cold as the hospital floor. "Beatrice, honey," Gladys said, cutting off Beatrice's opening sob. "We cannot help you. We saw the police report." Beatrice froze. "What police report? The one about Jamal stealing your identity?" Gladys continued. "And the one about the fake grandchildren. But mostly, Beatrice, we heard about what you did to Simone. How you left that poor girl to rot in a hospital waiting room while you sent your son to camp. How you threw her out of her own house on Christmas Eve." Beatrice gasped. "Who told you that?" "It does not matter who told us," Gladys said, though Beatrice knew immediately. Simone had been thorough. She had burned the bridge and salted the earth. "We are Christians, Beatrice, but we do not abide by wickedness. Do not call this number again. The prayer circle is for honest women." The line went dead. Beatrice stared at the phone. She dialed another number. Voicemail. She dialed a third. Blocked. One by one, the doors of her social standing slammed shut. She was not the victim anymore. She was the villain in her own story, and for the first time in 65 years, she had absolutely no one left to blame. She looked at the peeling paint on the wall curled up on the hard bed and stared into the empty future she had built with her own hands. The wind on the tarmac was cold, but it felt different now. It did not feel like the bitter wind of eviction or the freezing chill of an unheated apartment. It felt like freedom. I walked across the private airfield at DeKalb Peachtree Airport, my heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete. I did not head toward the commercial terminal where the masses lined up to take off their shoes and empty their pockets. I walked straight toward the private hangar at the end of the row. For years, I had flown commercial economy class to save money so I could fund Jamal's delusions of grandeur. I had eaten peanuts while he drank champagne on my credit card. But those days were done. I walked up to the pilot who was waiting by the stairs of a sleek black Gulfstream G650. The tail number ended in SIM. It was not a rental. It was not a charter. It was mine. I had bought it 2 years ago under the holding company, and I had never stepped foot on it because I was too busy working to pay for everyone else's leisure. "Good evening, Ms. Williams," the pilot said, tipping his cap. "We are fueled and ready for London." I paused at the bottom of the stairs. I looked at the gray Atlanta sky one last time. I thought about the empty mansion. I thought about the jail cell downtown. I thought about the nursing home room with the peeling paint. I had spent my entire life taking care of people who would have let me die. I had planned a vacation to Aspen for them because I thought they deserved the best. But they did not deserve the best. I did. "No, Captain." I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Cancel the flight plan to London. Take me to Aspen." He smiled back. "Aspen it is, ma'am." I climbed the stairs and stepped into the cabin. It smelled of fresh orchids and expensive leather. I sat in the cream-colored captain's chair and kicked off my boots. The flight attendant handed me a crystal flute of vintage champagne. I took a sip and watched the runway blur past the window. The plane lifted off, banking sharply into the clouds, leaving the heavy gravity of my family far below. I was finally flying, and for the first time in my life, I was carrying absolutely no baggage. The black SUV wound its way up the mountain road flanked by towering pines heavy with fresh powder. We pulled up to the entrance of the Pinnacles, the most exclusive resort in Aspen. It was a fortress of timber and stone glowing warmly against the twilight. The doorman did not just open the car door, he practically leaped to assist me. As I stepped out onto the heated pavement, the general manager was already waiting, his hands clasped respectfully in front of him. "Good evening, Madam Chairwoman," he said, bowing slightly. "It is an honor to have you with us this season. The penthouse has been prepared exactly to your specifications." I smiled. It was a title I rarely used in public, but here in the sanctuary of my own investments, it felt right. "Thank you, Henri," I said. "Please see that my pilot is taken care of." I walked through the massive double doors into the lobby. A fire was roaring in the stone hearth, reaching halfway to the ceiling, but the warmth did not come from the flames. It came from the small group of people sitting by the window. There was Julian, my CFO, who had stood by me when I had nothing. There was Elena, my college roommate, who was now a top surgeon. And there was Marcus, who had flown ahead to ensure everything was safe. They saw me and stood up. There was no hesitation, no checking of watches, no scanning my hands to see if I had brought gifts. Julian crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into a hug that threatened to crack my ribs. It was solid and real. It was a hug that did not ask for a loan. It was a hug that did not come with conditions. "You made it," Elena said, wiping a tear from her eye. "We were worried the storm would ground you." I looked at their faces. These were people who knew my net worth and did not care. People who loved me when I was eating ramen noodles, and people who celebrated with me when I rang the bell at the stock exchange. "I am fine," I said, letting myself sink into the velvet armchair they had saved for me. "I am better than fine." Julian handed me a glass of wine. "To family," he said, raising his glass. I looked at the bubbling liquid. I thought of the empty mansion in Atlanta. I thought of the lonely nursing home. Then I looked at the people around me. To the family we choose, I whispered. And I took a sip, tasting the sweetness of a life that was finally truly mine. The fire in the stone hearth crackled, sending warmth through the penthouse suite. Outside the panoramic windows, the snow fell in thick, heavy flakes covering Aspen in a blanket of white. It was the kind of Christmas Eve I had always paid for but never enjoyed until now. I was curled up on the sofa with a glass of Pinot Noir watching the flames dance when my phone buzzed against the coffee table. It was a jarring sound in the peaceful room. I picked it up. The screen illuminated a number I did not know with a local Decatur area code. I opened the message. The text was a block of desperate rambling typos. Simone, it is Mom. I borrowed the night nurse's phone. Please answer me. I am so lonely. Mrs. Gable is snoring and the room smells like disinfectant. I am sorry, baby. I am so sorry. Please come get me. Please let me come home. I cannot stay here. I stared at the screen. A year ago, that message would have sent me scrambling to book a flight. It would have triggered the guilt that had been programmed into me since birth. But tonight I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just the cold, hard clarity of a balance sheet that had finally been settled. My thumbs moved over the glass keyboard, typing slowly and deliberately. There is no home to come back to, Mother. I sold the house this morning. You are where you belong. You have Jamal, don't you? Oh wait, I forgot. He is busy serving a 20-year sentence. You wanted him to be the center of your world. Now he is. Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoy the consequences you built. I pressed send. I watched the delivered checkmark appear. Then without a second of hesitation, I tapped the info button. I scrolled down to the bottom of the screen. Block caller. Confirm. I placed the phone face down on the table. I picked up my wine and walked to the window, looking out at the vast, silent mountains. The ghosts were gone. The debt was paid. And for the first time in 30 years, the silence was not lonely. It was peaceful. The recreation room at Pine Creek smelled of floor wax and stale popcorn. Beatrice sat in her wheelchair staring at a coffee table cluttered with torn puzzles and old magazines that were months out of date. But one magazine stood out. It was glossy and pristine, a fresh copy of Forbes that a wealthy visitor must have left behind earlier that morning. Beatrice reached for it, her hand trembling as she recognized the face on the cover. It was Simone. But it was not the Simone she knew. It was not the girl who begged for affection, or the woman who paid the bills in silence. This woman was a titan. She was dressed in a sharp white power suit, standing with her arms crossed and a smile that could cut glass. Beatrice read the bold yellow text overlaying her daughter's torso. The Crisis Management Queen. How Simone Williams cleaned up toxic trash in business and family to build an empire. The words hit Beatrice like a physical blow. Toxic trash. That was the legacy she had left. She was not the beloved matriarch in the story. She was the debris that had to be removed so the structure could stand. She flipped to the article and saw photos of Simone in Aspen surrounded by beautiful, successful people. There were no photos of Jamal. There were no photos of Beatrice. The article did not even mention their names. It simply referred to them as dead weight that had held the CEO back for decades. Mrs. Gable wheeled past, clanking her walker against the floor. "That is a sharp-looking lady," she mumbled, pointing at the magazine. "She looks like she owns the world." Beatrice opened her mouth to say, "That is my daughter." She wanted to claim the credit. She wanted to bask in the reflected glory one last time. But the words died in her throat. She looked at Simone's radiant, confident face and realized she had no right to claim her. Tears welled up in her eyes, hot and stinging, running down her cheeks in silence. She closed the magazine and placed it face down on the table, hiding the brilliance she had tried so hard to dim. She was just a spectator now, watching from the cheap seats as her daughter flew. The air at 11,000 feet does not just fill your lungs, it cleanses them. I stood at the edge of the observation deck, looking out over the jagged spine of the Rockies. The sun was blinding, reflecting off the pristine snow in a million diamonds of light. It was cold enough to freeze breath in the throat, but I did not feel the chill. I felt only a burning, exhilarating warmth that started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips. From up here, everything looks small. The problems that used to consume my existence, the debts, the guilt, the screaming matches in the foyer, they are all just microscopic specks in the valley below. The silence here is absolute. It is not the tense silence of a dinner table where secrets are being kept. It is not the terrified silence of a hospital waiting room. It is the holy silence of a blank slate, a silence that belongs only to me. I looked down at my hands encased in black leather gloves. For 30 years, these hands had carried burdens that were not mine. They had signed checks for mistakes I did not make. They had wiped tears from faces that never looked at me with love, only with expectation. I had spent my life trying to buy a seat at a table where I was being served up as the main course. I had believed the great lie that keeps so many of us trapped in cages made of guilt. They tell you that family is the anchor that holds you in the storm. They tell you that you cannot sever the branch you grew from, no matter how rotten it becomes. They use the word blood like a weapon, a chain to bind you to people who drain you dry. They say blood is thicker than water. They say blood is the ultimate bond. But standing here under the vast, indifferent blue sky, I finally understand the truth. Sometimes blood is just the evidence of an injury. Sometimes blood is just the sticky mess left behind when you finally pull the knife out of your back. I spent my life bleeding for people who would not even offer me a bandage. I drained my bank accounts, my energy, and my self-worth to keep their circulation going. But the bleeding has stopped. I have washed the wound. I have scrubbed away the entitlement and the manipulation. The scar will always be there, a jagged line on my history, but it does not hurt anymore. It is just a reminder of what I survived. I look out at the horizon where the mountains meet the sky, and I see a future that is entirely my own. I am no longer the daughter who was left behind to die in a bedroom while her brother went to camp. I am no longer the invisible checkbook. I am no longer the backup plan, or the fixer, or the savage sister-in-law. I am a woman who learned that love is not a transaction and loyalty is not a suicide pact. The wind whips my hair across my face, wild and untamed. I take a deep breath, tasting the pine and the ice. I am Simone, and for the first time in my life, I am free. This story is a brutal reminder that shared DNA is not a license for abuse. Simone spent decades buying a seat at a table where she was actually on the menu, confusing financial dependency with love. The ultimate lesson is that family is defined by behavior, not biology. You cannot save people who are committed to their own destruction, and you certainly shouldn't finance their disrespect. True freedom begins the moment you realize that blood might be thicker than water, but sometimes blood is just the sticky mess left behind when you finally pull the knife out of your back. If you have ever had to cut off a toxic relative to save your own sanity, hit that subscribe button and share your story in the comments, because you are not alone and you are finally free.